Okay, I'm about to ruin the way you remember Jurassic Park, because the version of the movie we got, well, isn't the one they originally planned to make. There are scenes that were completely removed, moments that were completely rewritten, and an entire sequence that was considered too dark to include. And some of the most terrifying ideas, well, they were never shown at all. So what exactly did they take out? And more importantly, why did they take them out? And before we get started, I'd like to say that I am not just covering the standard novel deaths or things that were in the novel that weren't in the film. I'm talking about actual scenes that were meant to be in the movie. None of this AI bullshit. But brace yourselves, because I'm not going to sugarcoat some of this. Some of it is extremely gruesome. And I'd like to start with Ray Arnold's death scene. We all know Ray Arnold in the movie. He's the guy who says, "Hold on to your butts," constantly chain smoking, and the guy who can't hack into Nedry's PC. But we also remember he's the guy who first goes to the maintenance shed and never returns, only to give Ellie a lovely pat on the back. Now, there was an entire sequence that was meant to be filmed showing his death. We would potentially got to see how Arnold would have lost his arm and his leg, because believe it or not, there was a sequence that Ellie would actually stumble over his corpse. That's how she ends up with the twisted ankle we see. You know, where she's going through the bunker, she looks like she's actually dragging her foot behind. That's because she twists her ankle falling over Ray Arnold's corpse. They actually had the prosthetic of his leg made. They couldn't show any of this because during filming, a hurricane actually struck. The footage you see of all the waves and rain hitting the island, that's actual real life footage of them on the island and the hurricane. They flew all the actors off the island, and because they were so strapped for time, they couldn't fly half of them back. So Samuel L. Jackson wasn't flown back to shoot that scene. They decided to cut it entirely and thought it was a good idea because of the gruesomeness as well. There was also a scene where Ellie Sattler was in the maintenance shed and she was trying to turn the power back on, and a raptor would actually grab her. This was removed though, because if she did get grabbed by the raptor somehow, it would have left a horrible wound, so they decided to cut that scene. But this one, well, this one was pretty gruesome and they had to cut it, and it is the extended Jinaro death scene. We all know how Jinaro dies. It's iconic. He dies sitting on the toilet. But what I always found odd is then later on we have Robert Muldoon and Ellie turn up in the gas-powered Jeep, and all of a sudden all you hear is, "I think this is Jinaro." Now, when I was a kid, I thought that was in reference to the T-Rex escape, but it was actually in reference to Jinnaro's body. You see, there was an entire prosthetic, a scene where they actually find parts of his body, specifically an arm piece. This was actually filmed but was cut due to both pacing and because how disgusting a severed arm would have been in it, despite literally showing a severed arm later on from Mr. Arnold. Now this one and the one coming up after it are extremely interesting. Let's start with Ian Malcolm, the last minute hero. You see, in an interview with Jeff Goldblum specifically given to the Encore Movie Network, he talks about how Ian Malcolm was never supposed to grab the flare. It was literally planned for Malcolm to flee in panic rather than heroically try and create the diversion for Grant to rescue the kids. You see, Jeff was unhappy with the cowardly direction of his character. He actually persuaded Spielberg to change this scene. It's also speculated that this came very late into the production because the comic adaptation and the shooting script still have the original version where Malcolm runs away cowardly. Just a quick one before we get into the next one. If you've enjoyed this video so far and learned something new, hit that like button please. Now this one is one of my personal favorites, and it's to do with the Triceratops encounter. And it literally would have explained one of the biggest gaps in the movie, and that is why the Triceratops was sick. And it's the part where Tim finds rounded stones beside the West Indian lilac. You know, where they talk about it's toxic to animals. We actually see Ellie and Dr. Grant pick up the stones. These are the stones which the Triceratops had been eating, but they were also eating berries, which caused them to be sick. This resolution was present in the novel, although the scene involved a Stegosaurus instead of a Triceratops. It's likely that this scene was cut because it was too disgusting to conclude with Ellie's arm deep in Triceratops poo finding them stones. It's also worth noting that the baby Triceratops scene was also supposed to take place around this time. This scene was also cut last minute after Stan Winston Studios produced the model for use. I mean, they literally made the model, they just didn't use it. But they did use that exact same model in the Lost World Jurassic Park when Nick and Sarah free the dinosaurs from the hunters. Now this one is extremely interesting, probably one of my favourite on the list, although there's one at the very end which is my personal favourite. But this one's still pretty close, and it is the Robert Muldoon Velociraptor Attack sequence. Now I know we all love Robert Muldoon and we love the clever girl scene. I mean, it's my outro for every single video. But there's an entire sequence filmed that was just too gruesome to even keep in the entire film. We all know the scene where Robert Muldoon is trying to hunt down the pack of velociraptors only to be hunted by them himself. And the last sequence is where the velociraptor pounces on him. Now, there was an entire scene shot here where there was going to be blood, gore, effects, and we actually see the Velociraptor basically digging into Muldoon. Now, they couldn't show this on screen and had to use foliage to try and cover up the attack sequence because it was too gruesome to show. You see, they still wanted to keep the age rating PG to appeal to the widest audience possible. Adding in all the severed arms, legs, now this grotesque scene would bump up that rating and kind of limit the audience it was shown to, i.e. limiting Universal's profits. So they had to use this foliage to cut out that gore, but at the same time still showing Robert Muldoon getting attacked. It was a clever way to keep that sequence in, but not shown in its entirety. Now this one answers a question I had for a very long time, and is, how did Grant actually find his way back to the visitor center? I mean, he's on an island in the middle of nowhere, has no knowledge of where he is, but yet somehow manages to navigate from the T-Rex paddock back to the visitor center. I mean, he can't follow the road back, and he's in a paddock just after getting out of that Land Cruiser, so how does he navigate his way back? You see, the shooting script actually presents 3 different versions of the scene with Grant and the kids departing into the jungle after having escaped the car. Grant convinces Lex that she is much safer with him and Tim in the jungle than inside of that little storm drain. And this is where we learned that Alan Grant actually has a map of the island. And that answers the question of how Grant knew how to get back to the visitor center. This scene, however, was likely cut to keep the pace of the movie. Before we get on to one of my favorites, I'd like to address the long-standing urban legend about this scene. And this scene is the river raft scene. It's an urban legend that this scene was filmed and just cut before it was released. However, this never made it past storyboarding. These scenes, based on the Michael Crichton novel, where Grant, Lex, and Tim are going down the river, and then they were attacked by a T-Rex which was swimming, and people were saying it was partially filmed, then scrapped, or left incomplete. The fact of the matter is, it never left storyboarding. How do I know this? Well, David Keop himself, one of the writers, actually said he never wanted that raft sequence in the film, and said, for me, it was an easy cut to make from the storyboarding process, especially because it would have been so monstrously expensive to make. However, we did see a kinda similar version to this in Jurassic World Rebirth, although extremely CGI'd. Now, I will get on to Dennis Nedry and everything else in a second. Let's talk about the T-Rex smashes through the wall scene. There was a rumor that persisted through the fanatical version of Jurassic Park that it included a scene towards the end of the film where the Tyrannosaurus Rex actually smashes through the plaster wall in the visitor center. This scene was never included in the DVD or the VHS release of the film, and no evidence other than a first-person account has been found that this scene even existed. However, we do see something similar in Jurassic Park 3, where the Spinosaurus smashes through the fence in a similar style. You see, people always imagined or thought that the T-Rex smashes through the wall in the visitor center. It's not true. Steven Spaz Williams, in his Vimeo channel, actually said that no scene ever existed. The T-Rex just comes through a gap which is already there. But have you ever wondered how Ellie Sattler somehow gets a leaf in the car of the Jeep just before the Brachiosaurus scene? Well, there was an entire scene which was completely cut from the film. When they arrive on the island, there's a brief scene that appeared actually in the trailer but was never shown in the film, where Dr. Sattler grabs the extinct plant leaf as they're driving by. That fills in the gap as to how she miraculously has one during the Brachiosaurus scene. There's also an entire scene where Mr. Hammond explains to Jinaro, Grant, Sattler, and Malcolm why Lex and Tim are even at Jurassic Park. Hammond tells them that their family is going through a difficult time as their parents are getting a divorce. Hammond wants his guests to be understanding, but Dr. Malcolm makes a cynical comment. And this is partly why the reason was cut, because it paints Ian Malcolm as a somewhat nasty person when he's one of the main characters. But it could also be cut due to the pacing of the film. This text scene can be read in the Jurassic Park film script, scene 31. Because I've seen several channels come up with the strangest deleted scenes and all lost concepts, which is just complete AI bullshit, completely untrue and misinformation. So I'd like to address them in this video and give you the actual cut scenes. None of this AI drivel. So please hit that like button and support a real person rather than this AI shit. With that, let's talk about John Hammond's deaths. There was multiple deaths for John Hammond planned in this movie. They never made it even past the concept stage. You see, Michael Crichton had drafted up his first screenplay, and in one of them, Hammond is in the visitor center when he is startled by a twitching velociraptor corpse. Stumbling, he falls into the crashed scaffolding and skeleton and then becomes trapped within. Shortly after, a pack of compies enter the visitor center from the top of the escalator and descend down to devour him alive, his hands grasping the air as if he's pained and anguished. In another version, John Hammond is killed by raptors while the welcome video of him is being played from behind. You know, the one where you see him with Mr. DNA is stuttering and has an eerie effect as he's literally being attacked. In this one though, he's sacrificing himself in order to distract the raptors so Lex and Tim can actually escape. This is the redeemable quality of Hammond, and it starts to form in this scene. There's another version by Rick Carter's draft where Hammond is seen in the control room during the climax, and then raptors have now broken out of their pens and have entered the visitor center. John Hammond, with an incubated egg, which he plans to take with him upon leaving the park to save it, in quotation marks, hears Lex screaming downstairs. He opens the door to the control room to help, but is greeted by a raptor. Hammond falls backwards, crashing on a tabletop model of Jurassic Park as the raptor digs its claws deep into his chest. The incubator shatters on the floor, breaking one of the eggs, while another remains unharmed. There are other versions of the death as well, where Hammond is simply left behind on the island, either by his choice or by accident. There's some art and storytelling of these ideas obviously seen on screen, and they were done by the art director John Bell. But one of the most interesting of all, to me anyway, is the alternate endings of Jurassic Park, and they also feature John Hammond prominently. You see, instead of the T-Rex showing up and saving the day, it's actually John Hammond. He was scripted to appear with a shotgun and gun down the raptors. I know, it's absolutely crazy, right? And literally having a speech where he takes responsibility for his mistakes. Obviously, the Rexy ending is more iconic, but there was also a different ending with Rexy, where Rexy would actually chase them to the helicopter and actually try and prevent their escape. Ultimately, these were completely unused, although we do see the kind of like helicopter chase scene in Jurassic Park the game. Well, before I get on to one of my favorite scenes of all times, obviously Jurassic Park would feature dinosaurs, right? Who would have thought? But there was many different dinosaurs actually cut from the film or simply replaced. I briefly talked about the Triceratops earlier. Well, in early development, that was actually Stegosaurus, and it was actually Stegosaurus in the book. The same goes for the Gallimimus. That was actually meant to be an Hadrosaurus. The Brachiosaurus we see, that was actually meant to be an Apatosaurus. The Paras we see, actually meant to be Maiasaur, and was actually meant to feature a Hypsy somewhere along in the film as well. But ultimately, all these were changed, and they're just minor adjustments. Now onto one of my favourite characters of all time, and recently skyrocketed in popularity due to the Muldoon logs, which I'm yet to watch, but I will get around to watching them, and obviously it's Robert Muldoon. But this is a scene I would wish was in the movie, and I'd like to talk about it now. And that is Robert Muldoon using his custom rocket launchers. See, in the first book, Robert Muldoon uses a custom modified rocket launcher, which he actually uses to trank the Tyrannosaurus Rex. 3 had been made at his request, but he was only allowed to use them on the island and stored in a metal vault. But Muldoon actually had the foresight to put the rocket launchers in one of the 2 gas-powered jeeps. But it's also revealed that Robert Muldoon has a second rocket launcher on the island. And this one isn't Trank related. You see, he stashes this second rocket launcher in a gun locker in his office along with 6 shells, capable of blowing up any type of animal. And well, when the raptors escape, Muldoon has his chance. You see, Muldoon actually manages to kill one of the raptors with a single shot, blowing its torso apart. The second shot he actually gets off, while wedged in a pipe behind the visitor center, blows off another raptor's leg, although it does survive and presumably dies by the wounds it sustained by the rocket launcher. Now, I know these scenes sound absolutely crazy, and I wouldn't want a one-for-one recreation of that. All I would want is a Robert Muldoon sequence where instead of him actually dying to the Velociraptor, which may change the clever girl line, he actually puts up a bit of a fight, manages to take down a few Velociraptors with a shotgun, and whether he survives or not, maybe could have been left up to interpretation and explored later on in the film. Rather than him being killed out by a Velociraptor, maybe injured and scurries off into the jungle somewhere or into the visitor center, maybe to escape on a helicopter later on, who knows. Ultimately, he was obviously killed, but in the novel and the comic adaptation, he survives, and in all of the alternate endings, apart from the one we see on film, he survives. So although not a deleted scene, it's one I would have loved to have seen in the film. But what about you? Did you enjoy any of these deleted scenes? Would you like to see them in the movie? Is there ones which you think should have been in the movie but wasn't? Maybe from the novel? And please, if you enjoy this, hit the like button. Let's stop all this AI crap on the internet, misinformation, people reading from AI Google-generated scripts. Let's stop all that and support actual creators which put in actual work. Massive thanks to you for watching this to the very end. I really appreciate it. And a massive thanks to the InGen research team who are on screen now. With extra special thanks to DVM Wannabe 1018, Fallen Zuria, Zarkadian, and Joseph Frost Ghost. Thanks, guys. And if you came across a Velociraptor out in the open, could your day get any worse? You bet Jurassic can. Catch you later.